This chalice holds a lamp of glass and oil. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition holds a faith of tolerance and reason. When we ignite this wick, light and warmth pour forth. When we ignite our faith, love and truth pour forth. The light, the warmth, the love, the truth, all are one. And we are the flame. We practice a blended ministry here, which means that some Sundays we hear from our minister, the Reverend Ade Krabah, and some Sundays we hear from a UUNB congregant or someone from our larger community. Next week, we invite you back to hear Chaplain Kai Flannery, who will Zoom to us from the beautiful country that is called Tennessee. But this morning, we are happy to welcome to our gathering room Wade Arledge, a local attorney who, I've heard it said, blocks out as much time as he possibly can to sail away in his worthy vessel, Leading Star. This morning, he gives us a glimpse at his personal philosophy of living a good life, gathered from many a year of being in nature and sailing the open waters. So we're really happy to have you here. So our reading today is from The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Graham, and it is Ratty and Mole Out Boating. The rat stooped and unfastened a rope, then lightly stepped into a little boat, which the mole had not observed up until that very moment. It was painted blue outside and white within, and was just the size for two animals. And the mole's whole heart went out to it at once, even though he did not yet fully understand its uses. The rat sculled smartly across, and the mole stepped gingerly down, and to his surprise and rapture found him actually seated in the stern of a real boat. The rat shoved off and took to the sculls again. "Do you know," said the mole, "I've never been in a boat before in my entire life." "What?" cried the rat. "Never been in a... never? Well, what have you been doing then?" "Is it really so nice as all that?" asked Mole shyly as he felt the bow sway lightly under him. "Nice? It's the only thing," the water rat said solemnly as he leaned forward for his stroke. "Believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing around in boats. Simply messing," he went on dreamily, "messing around, simply messing." "Look ahead, rat!" cried Mole suddenly. But it was too late.
There's a rumor around town that I sailed around the world. Some people have heard that. And I did that about 20 years ago, but I didn't really go around the world. I just went from New Orleans to Baltimore, and from Baltimore to Mexico, and back to New Orleans. And I tell people I left town with a sack full of money and a boat, and I came back with a sack and some new shoes. So this group is so much fun. I was brought here by Juliet Watson and her friend and lover and husband, Albert Herder, who's a fantastic fellow. you may have seen here before or not, but he's always dressed in flowing robes. And he told me to dress up in a flowing robe today to speak. But I don't have a flowing robe, so I just put on my lawyer shirt. I love Sunday school, and Steve's a great teacher. And today he told us a proverb that's a Muslim kind of saying about trust in God or Allah, but always tie your camel first. Okay. So in the boating world, you need to learn to always tie your dinghy. And that brought home a story, which I'll just tell real quick. But I was on the East Coast in Charleston, and the tides there are tremendous. They flow in and out twice a day, and they raise and lower the water level around 12 feet. And so it's a huge current. And some of the rivers backflow, like whatever I think it's called the New River in Charleston, but whatever the river's name is, it'll start flowing upstream and downstream. So I was anchored in the harbor, and it rained and rained and rained and rained some more. And I was stuck on the boat with a friend of mine, and we got real tired of each other. And the shore was just right over there. And at the shore was a marina, and in the marina was a Snickers bar. And that's all I could really think about is I wanted the Snickers to be running out of food because just 24-hour rain. So we had a clear spot. I opened the hatch. I jumped off the boat. I jumped in the dinghy. I untied it. Then I tried to start it, which was the wrong order of things. So it didn't start. It washed me up the creek, past the Harbridge, not a creek, a river. And then I was up there for a while, started raining again. Motor wouldn't start. And then I started coming back downstream, grabbed a hold of another boat, got rescued. My friend in the boat didn't even know I was gone. I thought I was going to die the whole time. So, and Jan was asking me to speak, and so I was going to talk about life, and that Zen comment came from my youth when I read the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which I had really forgotten about until she asked me to speak about it. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with that book, but it's about Buddhist thought and Buddhist life, and I'm kind of a Buddhist. But again, not till this morning did I really realize that Buddhism is not a practice of life that is deeply embedded in your relationship with God. It's just not. It's about your relationship with yourself and in listening to your life and actually quieting your inner dialogue to just listen and then maybe get away from some of the things that you get tangled up in life. And so they have this concept of the Four Noble Truths. You know, the first noble truth is described as life is suffering, which is really a bummer, you know. And then you read about that and it says, well, it's not really suffering in the sense of suffering. It's suffering in the sense of being unsatisfied and going through your life. And I've heard this said before, and we'll hear it again, in a sense of dis-ease, you know, where you're not at ease with yourself. That's the first, and that's just what life brings us. The second noble truth is something like, what are you dissatisfied about? And they say the mistake is you're trying to find your happiness or your bliss or your ease from things outside of yourself instead of inside of yourself. And if you can let those things outside of yourself go, because at the end, all things are impermanent, including disease and including these outside things that you seek. And they say that they're bad things, but in essence, they're just bad because they don't last. And then the third truth is there is a way to avoid that suffering by learning to release yourself from those desires that are not satisfying. Now, to me, because I'm not a very good Buddhist and I'm not a very good Methodist where I was raised, to me, it does have a thing about God to me, or whatever that thing is that we hear in our heads that I refer to it as my inner voice. But what I learned on a boat and then through my life, because I grew up in the desert, and so naturally I wanted to go to the ocean. And so I was around these people, and we had little boats, and we would go to the lake, and we would have all these great adventures on these West Texas lakes, including storms and breakdowns and, you know, adventures like crazy in little boats. And as I went through life, I got up here to bigger water on Canyon Lake and got involved in a different kind of boat, which was a sailing vessel. And sailing vessels are all about wind, and wind is certainly part of West Texas and here too. It's a little more rare here, But that's what powers those boats. And that's also what powers airplanes. It creates lift. The way the air flows over a wing or a sail, which is really just a vertical wing, it creates a lift, and that's what pulls a boat forward or lets an airplane fly through the air, is the lift. And the air is all around us all our lives. And in our world, it's what's moving around the world is wind. And so the wind is always involved in people being able to move about the earth, which is mostly water. We're mostly water. And that's how people got from one place to another for ever since anybody figured out you could float on the water and go somewhere. So there's all kinds of different boats and ways to get around, but it's all tied into the wind, which I view as, a God thing. I mean, I think, God created the earth, so, or whatever did, and that's part of the power of nature. And then as I got a little older and hit 40 and didn't have a midlife crisis and spend all my money and run off on a boat, I went off on this adventure and realized while I was doing that, as I bought a boat, fixed a boat, because my nature is to fix things. That's what I do. And it's a blessing and a curse. And sometimes I need to leave things alone, but when I see something I perceive as needing fixing, I'm going to fix it. So I've gotten pretty handy. I can work on cars and boats and airplanes and people in my professional life. And so I want to fix things. So I got a boat, I fixed it. Completely self-contained kind of experience. You're on this vessel. It has everything that you need on it. With me, it was some food, some engines, lots of air conditioners because I like to be cold in the South, and engines and all the complications with it. But you're self-contained in this vessel, and it's real fun until it breaks, and then you do stuff. But to me, that's the fun part. But I spent a lot of my journey on that trip around the coastline helping other people fix their boats. And so gave me some fulfillment, and I didn't sink mine. But I met this couple along the way. When I first bought the boat, it was broken. So we got a good deal on it. And my brother, Adam, who was with me, is not mechanical. And I am. And it scared him because it was a big messy thing that the engine wouldn't start and all this kind of stuff. And so along the way, I told him, just leave your money and go back to Dallas and I'll get the boat going. So I met this guy, Frank, and his wife, Sharon, who became my teachers. And they had spent about 10 years living on a boat in the Caribbean, had actually got blown away in a storm, nearly sunk, but made it. Sharon is a Cherokee Indian from Oklahoma, and Frank's a Cajun from the swamps of Louisiana, but they went to sea. And so Frank became my mentor, and he taught me the kind of the lesson, I guess, of today's talk for me anyway, which is to just stop and listen. And I used to call it guilt, go fix the tire, turn the hydrant off, turn the hydrant on, service the whatever, do the file, help my friend. These chores are things that you do. But what Frank always told me is that that's a message to you that when you have a thought and you're on a vessel and you're out at sea, in the first place, that's not our place as human beings. That's not our world. We are definitely visitors in a place where really we mean nothing except maybe a little bitty snack for some kind of big old critter if we're dumb enough, to have to get in their environment. So you're floating out there in the ocean with just a thin layer of steel or wood between you and infinity. And so I tell people that boats are like, is anybody in here an RV person? Do you have a travel trailer? Got travel trailer people? They break all the time too. They've got all kinds of systems and you got to work on them. But the boat adds a new dimension, which is it can sink too. And and you may not be in a good place to sink. I mean, if you're going to sink, you want to be in about 5 feet of water, not 5,000 feet of water. So you have all these contingency plans and emergency rafts and beacons and telephones and things to go help. But, at the end of the day, you don't want to sink. So what Frank was trying to tell me is that when you are sitting around doing nothing or thinking great thoughts or listening to music or cooking dinner on a boat and you're out in the middle of either the ocean or nowhere along the coast in 10 feet of water, if you have this thought, I wonder if the gasket on the water pump is okay. He says, you don't need to say, well, I'll do that tomorrow. You need to get up and go look at the gasket on the water pump, okay? Go down there right now and look. And so listen to what you're being told, because in his view, I think Frank and Sharon were Unity Church people, whatever that is, but they were kind of religious and spiritual people. But Frank said, that's a message from God telling you, get up and go do it. Don't think about doing it. Don't let it go. Just go do it. Now, I don't know about y'all, but my biggest weakness has always been procrastination. I am the king of procrastination. I call it the goddess procrastinata. I am a firm adherent to her ways, and so that's my big weakness. And so what I learned is not to do that. I try to live my life that way. I still fail all the time, but my passage through life has been to listen and try to react and do what I hear or what I'm told. And so that was the big lesson I took away from sailing. If y'all are interested in sailing, I came here from West Texas in 1982. I found Canyon Lake. I like to tell people who are from where I'm from that I found a piece of water that I could go swim in, and my underwear didn't turn red. You know, I could actually wear them again. And so I got hooked on Canyon Lake. And when I got to Canyon Lake, I got hooked on sailboat racing, which is a whole nother thing. Racing a sailboat is really madness. You know, you get out there. And so I was involved with this group of people at a club at the lake, and they were racers. They were national champion. It's just as competitive as anything you can imagine. And they even have the types of racing they call fleet racing, where every boat is exactly the same, exactly down to the last pound of weight, down to the pounds of the crew, the measurements of everything. So it's supposed to, kind of like a lot of car racing, it's supposed to be just the test of the skills of the crew. And we had a 3-person crew. And I met my other mentor, who was a guy named Lloyd Lindsay. And Lloyd was the same age as my dad, and he had a son my age, Fred, and we were a team together. And then later, Lloyd introduced me to racing, and he was very good, and he learned to sail in Hawaii in big water in the Pacific Ocean. And so he was Air Force. And so when he came back from Hawaii, he got to racing on Canyon Lake, and that guy had 2 or 3 china cabinets chock full of trophies. Lloyd won. I mean, that's what he did. He was so competitive and so serious about what you do. So it's like a team sport on this boat. And my job was to be on the front of the boat when I was skinny, to work the foresail and the spinnakers and things like that in these races, where we're racing anywhere from 20 to maybe 50 or 100 boats in a race. And all the boats are just alike. And we're out there depending on the wind and how you feel the wind and prophesize the wind. And out in this part of the world, the wind sometimes is really not happening at the lake. You just got these little zephyrs and puffs of wind. You know, you want more wind. And then you go to the coast and you get blown over. Or you go to West Texas or Fort Worth and race, and it's just like a hurricane. So you have to be able to adjust to race in all conditions. And then you have to be able to work together to make it all happen. So that's a different kind of sailing than cruising, which is what I did when I ran away and bought a boat. Then I just got kind of lazy, and, you know, I could have a pot of beans going on the stove while I was sailing around. It wasn't racing. It was just trying to get from one place to another without sinking. So during all of that, I guess where I was trying to be funny, and then I realized I don't know that much about Buddhism. And this very morning, thanks to Steve, we were looking at and comparing, we're doing comparative religion. I encourage everybody to come to Sunday school. It is so much fun, but we're doing comparative religion. And this morning we were talking about Buddhism, which is really not about God, which had never really occurred to me. Because to me, I kind of have a sense of there's something out here bigger than I am, and I need to listen. But I realize in the Buddhist theory, it's really not God. So maybe I learned this morning, maybe I'm a monist. Is that what it is, Steve? Or a pandeist, that God is everywhere. But I do think that I'm always being taught to, and I need to listen. So that's kind of what I learned sailing around. So I made a couple of notes. I'm trying to hit most of it, but at the end, it is about what I say, paying attention. And so right now in our country is quite a time to be alive, you know. And I'm not one bit afraid of dying, but I do want to live a lot longer because I want to see what's going to happen. I mean, it's getting really interesting right now. And there's that guy out there. I forgot to write him down, but he's the historian that used to be the editor of Newsweek magazine, and he wrote a book, and then he made a documentary called The Soul of America. And he's talking about our times today and how could we have gotten ourselves into this place. And it doesn't really matter what side of the political spectrum we're on. We're in a moment of crisis in a form of government, and this Unitarianism is about public service and being involved in your community and trying to make a difference in the world. And there are people doing that on both sides of this argument, but it's testing our democracy like it's never been tested before. And he has this great video, which I recommend, called The Soul of America. And he starts it out by saying, how can we be in this place where we have, all this divisive stuff going on and all this distrust and things that aren't loving and pitting people against one another and this fight, and it involves currently, immigration and money and people feeling displaced and afraid and the other people coming and, in current times, the gay people. And so what he did was, in other groups that are now being considered and recognized, and then he said, we've been here before. And then he starts showing the film clips of 1918 and America First and Woodrow Wilson. And guess what, ladies? Women getting the vote, suffragettes in 1918. The world was in turmoil then too, just like it is now, anti-immigration. And so it's a cycle, and I hope that we cycle out the other side of it. But while you're in the middle of it, it seems like a crazy time to me, but also interesting. But it also is something that I hear, which is time to do what we can individually to try to make the world a better place. And so I kind of got fired up again. I don't know if procrastinato will get me or not, but I'm going to try to do something in my community to make a difference, to try to reach people, to tell them, don't get stuck on labels, get stuck on who you're voting for, because America, the power is in the vote. And so that's what makes America go. And I think as voters, we've all dropped the ball to a certain degree and not paid attention to who we're voting for. So I'm just going to leave y'all with a thing. When my friend Lloyd died, this other friend of mine, Bob, gave his eulogy. And Lloyd was my captain in a racing boat. And we had this boat we owned together. It took 5 or 6 people to race it. We used to take it to Houston. We always won everything. And so Lloyd died, and my friend gave his eulogy, and he said, I like to think of Lloyd being up wherever he went, heaven, and it's like a big, huge lake. And on that lake are these beautiful boats, and they're all lined up, and they're all racing. And then way out there in the front, you see this one boat, and it's Lloyd's boat. And Lloyd's boat was named TLT, the Lindsay tribe, which I was part of. And he said, I see the Lindsay tribe boat up there, and it's way out in front of everybody, and the wind's real light, but they seem to be just magically moving because Lloyd knew the wind. And then over the water, you hear this voice come. He goes, ready about, which means you're about to turn your boat, to tack it. And you hear, helm's a lee, which means you push your helm over to push the boat through the eye of the wind to get on another tack. And then you hear this huge explosion of noises and clattering, and then the boat falls off on another tack, and there goes old Lloyd. So that's what sailing is to me, is life and wind and the spirit of whomever she may be, God or whoever, driving the world, and we're along for the ride. So I encourage everybody to just listen and do what you can to make the world a better place. And as the historian, who I've completely forgotten his name, John Meacham, as John Meacham says, be a better angel. Thank you, Susan. I don't know if y'all have seen it, but you really should watch The Soul of America. That's what he's talking about. And he's what used to be a Republican. So, who knows? So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Labels don't matter all that much. It's just about listening. So thank you for listening to me.
And now we extinguish this flame, but the fire which is each of us remains. May the light of love, truth, and goodness be part of us always. And may we share this light freely wherever we go. Blessed be.